Leave me for somebody else. Enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself.
Hello everyone, Zoe here. It has been a good minute since my last discussion, and I'm hoping it won't be too long before my next one, but we'll see. Today, I want to talk about the problem with Christianity these days because I have a lot of issues with the way my faith is portrayed, especially in like the recent years. I think judgment and criticism, especially, has been very prevalent among other problems within the church, and I think whether you're a believer, an atheist, or something in between, you've probably noticed this. So, my main focus today is to kind of hone in on these issues and kind of talk about it and address it from a religious perspective, you could say. And it's also partly to also validate and sympathize with those who have had to deal with church hurt or church trauma in the past, because I know a lot of people have unfortunately had to deal with this, and I really feel for it because I haven't really experienced this personally, but I know people first and second hand who have had to deal with at least some form of criticism or judgment from the church or those who are supposed to be Christian and, not living out their fruit. So I'm here to kind of just talk about all that today. And then I do want to address a little bit of just some things that have been on my mind in terms of those outside the faith, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions and assumptions of what Christianity is about and who God is as a person, well, our creator. And a lot of it, I will admit, and I understand that a lot of that hesitancy and sort of apprehension that people have, it's because of their past experiences and their trauma and the hurt. So I understand that and I sympathize with that. And so I kind of just really want to address this because there are some things that I think not everyone is really aware about. And just, in general, I just want to kind of explore all this, I guess. Now, before we start, I do just want to say that I might go a bit off topic in the sense that I will kind of divert and jump around from the same topic, but just kind of diving into different subtopics and kind of bouncing around with my thoughts because I don't really have a script to work with, and I would rather not do that because it takes a lot of time, energy, and dopamine to, write one up and then have to rehearse everything. And I think it feels more authentic and more genuine if I just kind of go with the flow. So please don't mind if I stutter or anything, but without further ado, let's just hop into it. So the first thing I want to address is the judgment and criticism and kind of trauma that the church has kind of put on people. So basically, I think a lot of issues, when people talk about kind of the trauma and the hurt they've gone through, two main scenarios come to my head in terms of the most common ones I see online at least. And they're either a situation of SA, or it involves a person being judged for being LGBTQ or being alt, or, something that I guess one would consider maybe not the norm or what the world would consider normal, right? So those two, I think, are the most common scenarios that I've seen online. And often, a lot of people, you could struggle. There's a lot of people who do have certain struggles, and whether it's that or whether it's something else, I think no matter what it is, the church has just been very critical towards members. And I think that there are a lot of religious hypocrites. And it's unfortunate that the church has kind of gotten this way, because now we have really only ever pushed others away. And it's why we have this fake idea of what Christianity is nowadays. So it's why people are very afraid or hesitant towards opening themselves up to the group that claims to follow Christ, but then they go and, we're acting the opposite way and acting the opposite of how Jesus would have treated people, which is with love and kindness. A lot of people are very also, some people are too religious in the sense that they're very strict in certain traditions and orders, and there's a lot of legalistic Christians out there, and it kind of just sucks out all the fun of being a Christ follower as well. I'll take one example. There's this content creator that I follow that I don't tune in with her stuff a lot, but she's an ex-witch, and something I'm aware of is that pretty much every day she is being attacked by Pharisees in her comment sections. Just the other day, she made a video of her running like Jack Sparrow, and someone said she was promoting alcoholism. I'm kind of speechless at that, and then really not long after, maybe the same day or the next day after, she made a video of her just dancing because David danced in the Bible, and someone said she was mocking the Lord. And it's crazy because those are like more minor scale things, I think, because I've seen like she's been accused of still being a witch, of promoting other sins or like teaching people how to cast spells and stuff. And that's kind of the opposite of what she's trying to do. So it's very interesting the way that people are just very judgmental and focusing a lot on people's looks and the way they speak, or just like being nitpicky about every little thing. I've seen people online just say they've been like judged or I guess maybe called out or something, right? For just their skirt being a little bit too short, maybe, or their colors a little bit too bright in church. And it's kind of crazy that people can be so focused. And I didn't even know it got that bad sometimes. Like, I don't think I really considered it properly. I'm sure like I would believe it straight away if I heard it. And I do believe it, but I am surprised that people can just be focused on the tiniest things. And people, yeah, there's definitely no harm in, you want to please the Lord and you want to make sure you're modest and, you're dressing appropriately for church. I understand that, but some people take it a little bit too extreme. And at the end of the day, it is just being hypocritical because they're judging you for this little thing, but then, well, what are they doing? They are making an unrighteous judgment there, and then that's a sin in itself. And then if we want to hone in on the issue of SA, I know that there's obviously a lot of people online and just in general, people talk about that they got, at church or something, or someone of a leadership role has abused them in some way. And, sometimes they don't speak up about it for years, and it does create a lot of trauma, obviously. And, I'm not going to take it lightly, obviously. It's a very serious thing, and I really feel for people who have had to deal with that. I want to say that to those who have kind of dealt with people like that, or even if it's not been SA, but it's been more verbal or kind of emotional, right? Those people are not representations of a real Christian. And if anything, I would argue that they have never really been a Christian. I obviously can't speak for everyone, and I don't want to make a huge generalization because we all sin and we all are going to mess up. But obviously, some people don't realize that. They don't recognize their sins or they don't repent. And some people, they continue the same way. It's not like just a matter of messing up once and apologizing. And, in a scenario like SA, that's a really serious thing. And you know what you're doing when you're doing that. So anyone who does that is not a Christian. They do not represent Jesus whatsoever. They do not represent what a true Christian should be acting like. And it's definitely not love. The last church I went to actually was a cult, and there was a situation that happened that I was not aware of until recently, even though I last went to the church 3 years ago. The scenario that happened, it got covered up to protect the reputation of that church. And it's probably only recently come out, as of the last few years. And so I get like some people they force the victims to stay quiet to protect the reputation of the church. And again, that is not a representation of what a true Christian should be like, and of a church. And a lot of churches, I do believe, like not just the people kind of church, but literally the congregation or those in the leadership, they are failing there. It's why I honestly don't trust a lot of churches, and especially even mega churches, it's a bit of a different scenario because mega churches I don't know which ones have had issues in that area, but I know like there are a lot of mega churches that are more about performance and being a concert, and it's very performative, as I just mentioned. So it's more about people pleasing, I would say, and it's less about the gospel and the message, more about just appealing to those on the outside, or just, it's very watered down Christianity as well in terms of the preaching and the message. And I do imagine there have been some mega churches in which, situations have happened and it's been covered up. And again, they do not represent real Christians. It's just an unfortunate thing that this is a issue because it does put a bad name on Christianity and puts a bad name on God in a sense. Like, it is not his fault, but obviously, people blame God and say, well, why did this happen? So again, I understand why a lot of people have hesitancy, and I really feel for people who have dealt with this. So it's a real shame that we have all these issues in the church. I think the main ones really essay and judgment. And that's something that really needs to be addressed, I think. I think the unfortunate thing is that just there's a lot of people in leadership who should not be in leadership. It's not even just what I've just mentioned, but like you get money scandals or affairs, and a lot of pastors do get like they're getting exposed more and more for sins that they shouldn't have even committed in the first place, right? They shouldn't be having an affair. They shouldn't be scaling for money and stealing it from the people, right? And that is another thing with megachurches, actually. Megachurches are very much, they are money grabbers, and there are churches that will, promote books and all these different things, or promote for donations and get tithing and stuff. And that's kind of another reason why I really don't trust churches now. Like, this is kind of just like a personal opinion as well, but just based off also what I've seen around and online and have heard about. So lots of different factors in there. Now, it isn't to say that like every church is wrong and that the one you're going to isn't a good one, but definitely I think people need more discernment, because there are a lot of churches, and even you can see deliverances in church and people praying over each other, and a lot of good heart, like happy feeling messages. But it is important to consider the words as well, because a lot of deliverances I think can be fake. Not all of them, but just things like that, they can be faked. And I do know of pastors and preachers who they're not real like Christians, and they're not real pastors, and they actually are operating of another spirit. They are not really doing deliverances, and it's all fake, and it's all just for money and fame. It's just a sad truth. It's the way the world has gone with churches nowadays, and that's why, honestly, I think it is better to do more kind of closer connections and really find a group that is going to be led by Christ. But sometimes that's not in a building where you would normally find fellowship. Sometimes it is on a smaller scale or in your own home. And yeah, so this is just something I want people to be aware of. It's just, please have more discernment, especially in the church you are, especially if you're going to a mega church, because I really wouldn't trust any of them. And I think you really need to consider that, because also a lot of churches have a lot of false theology, and even in the music, not all, but a lot of songs do. And some of them I will name would be Bethel, Elevation, not Elevation Rhythm, I'm not sure, but just the church Elevation, Bethel, Hillsong. Those are definitely some of the big ones up there, and I wouldn't trust any of them. Now, there is another issue I also want to talk about, and it is progressive Christianity and then also lukewarm Christians. These two are very much pet peeves, and just, I guess, the concept of them, they do irritate me. And I have a lot of opinions on lukewarm Christianity and progressive Christianity. There is a difference, but at the same time, they do overlap, I think. The best way I see lukewarm Christianity is people, you believe in God, you go to church, you might pray every once in a while, you read your Bible, but you're not fully surrendered to the Lord. And I think a lot of people do fall into this trap, and it is a dangerous area. I've seen people who, there are people who will question whether or not they're lukewarm, or they feel lukewarm, and I've even felt like this myself. But I think there is a defining difference between people who are actually lukewarm and then those who just feel like it and are struggling in an area to be close to the Lord. And that factor would be that those who are lukewarm, they don't really care, or they don't consider it, and they're not the ones actively trying to better themselves. They're people very comfortable in the world already, right? They go to church on Sunday, they read the Bible, they pray on Sunday, they do the fellowship, they join in worship. But then the rest of the week and the whole week before, they aren't really living the Christian lifestyle. Maybe they aren't struggling in cursing. Maybe they don't party and drink all the time. But it could just be living life and just not really thinking of God as much. And it's still partaking in the world, in other smaller scale things, right? They don't read the Bible every day. It's only, in church, or they don't really pray much. Or if they do, it's only when they want something from the Lord and not just for, I don't know, just to thank Him. And yeah, I think a lot of lukewarm Christianity, it's a lot more of just, it feels good, right? You grow up in a Christian household and, your parents are Christian, so that just automatically makes you Christian, and that's kind of what your belief is. And I think a lot of modern Christianity has gotten this way. There's just a lot of people who grew up in households. I've known people, I've met people around. Just, you see it online or in person, and it's just very typical Christianity. It's like, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. But it is something, and I think that it is something that's dangerous. I think people really need to take heed to this, especially, and keep in mind how risky waters it is, because if you're not surrendered to the Lord, that means you probably don't feel convicted about things. Or if you do, you're kind of just ignoring it and pushing away. It's just that little feeling of, this might not be the right thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that could be watching shows you're not supposed to, or things that, you feel a bit off, and things like watching horror movies, like really, really bad ones. And I don't know, listening to secular music that has like a whole bunch of swearing or promotes things that are unbiblical, right? And I think people really do need to consider this, especially. Now, in terms of progressive Christianity, this one, I don't know which I think annoys me more, just like as a personal thing, because progressive Christianity is lukewarm, but I think not all lukewarm is progressive. So just take it like that, right? Progressive Christianity, that kind of form of lukewarmness, it is very much supporting and going along with the world in terms of things that really aren't biblical, in the sense that the two stances I do uphold, that I do believe are unbiblical, and that a Christian cannot do these things. That is supporting abortion and, supporting or being part of the rainbow community. I do think there's ways, like, I want to address this at some point, but those two are the main ones that I think of when I first think of progressive Christianity. And it's people who go along and support those things, and it isn't always that. But like I said, those are the only two things I can think of off the top of my head, and I don't think you can support abortion and be a Christian. If you're a Christian, your stance should be that, it's murder. I do believe that, and I'm gonna stand on that hill. I guess where I think it is sort of, I don't know if it's a bit more dangerous to be progressive than lukewarm. I mean, it's the same thing, but like I said, you're supporting people in what the Bible would call a sin, right? So if God uses that, then you're supporting it. Or it's in the same way you might not be as fussed as, you're sleeping around, or you engage in hookup culture, and you say you're Christian, but you're still doing that. So it's not as progressive, but that could equate to being lukewarm, just in a sense, right? So yeah, those are kind of all the main issues I think is happening in the church. A lot of judgment and criticism, even within the Christian community. A lot of people bashing each other left, right, and center. And it is really, really not good. And then, you've got people who are very more laxed about things that they shouldn't be laxed about. And something I will also stand on is that you can't support Halloween and be a Christian. Well, let me rephrase that. I think you can be a Christian and you might celebrate Halloween, but I think that if you aren't aware of its origins and what it represents, then, that is something you need to have an open mind with, because I do believe that you shouldn't be partaking in Halloween. That's something I definitely will stand on. So, again, right, lots of different things. And one other thing I will add is the church has been very divisive also because of denominations, and I don't even know all of them and what they all kind of believe. I know minimal about Catholicism. I know some of the basics, but then I don't really know much about like Protestant or all the other denominations, honestly. But I think there is a lot of divisiveness there. Like, a lot of people can, get a bit iffed about each other. And I think there does need to be more unity between denominations, because yeah, I do believe that there's some right and some wrong in all of it. And I'm personally non-denominational, but again, maybe you believe that some of the things I'm standing for is wrong, and I'm happy to have a discussion about it. But I do think some people, yeah, like in denominations, they can kind of like attack each other, and that is also a problem. So I think everyone just needs to kind of consider this and keep it in mind. Just, we really do need to have more love and respect and kindness for each other overall, just everyone in the church and out the church, right? Now, to finalize, I want to talk about those outside the faith. So, it might not necessarily be like straight up atheist. It could be someone who's pagan, right? Or Muslim. So it doesn't really matter. But just anyone who've had certain assumptions about Christianity. Now, again, like I said earlier, I do understand why there's hesitancy, and a lot of times it is because people have had really bad experiences in the church and from Christians who have been really hateful. So I do sympathize with people who've had to deal with that, and I apologize on behalf of them. I really think that people who have done such things to you they don't represent the real, I guess, character of Jesus and how real Christian should be acting. And I think they are definitely one of those religious hypocrites. I guess some of the things that do irk me though is when people say, well, if God's real or if he's loving, then why did this happen? Why did that happen? And just really blaming God for things that people did. I don't want to talk about it too much in this discussion, but I will just say the reason that things happen that, one might blame God for is that we all have free will and we were given free will so that we weren't, we're not being controlled, we're not robots, and we get the choice to love God. And so, people be like, well, why would loving God send me to hell? And again, I want to talk about this in another video, but ultimately, it is a matter of free will, it is a choice, and I guess if you don't want to have a relationship with the Lord on earth, why would you want to have a relationship and be with him in the afterlife, basically? That's kind of what it is, because he's not going to force you to be with him. And something I saw heard on a podcast, an interview podcast, whatever you want to call it, right, from the ex which I mentioned earlier. She said that God doesn't send us to hell, we're walking there. And I really stand by that quote, honestly. It's true. And I've seen other people kind of say the same thing, though. It is true, because we are making the choices. We choose to judge people, we choose to love people, we choose to hate people, we choose to hit a person, we choose to get revenge, we choose all these things, and we have that choice. And so ultimately, with every bad thing that happens that's been caused by a person, it isn't that God doesn't want us to not suffer and, not go through that. In fact, he really does hurt when we are hurting. And he's saddened that people do carry out such horrible actions. The reason it does happen, which is, again, really unfortunate that some things that are really bad occur, it is a matter of a person's free will. God's not going to take that choice away from one person, even if it means, everyone has their own choice and they'll do with that what they please. Because again, we're not robots. And sometimes, this is not an easy thing to understand because, it's really unfortunate that people have to deal with, maybe abusive parents or narcissistic friends or, toxicity in the world. Ultimately, this answer is probably not going to please everyone. I can't please everyone, and I wish I could say that I have an answer for everything ultimately, but I don't. I don't know God's full character. I'm not going to ever know why some things he allows happened, and that is kind of an area of faith. So, take that little bit with a grain of salt maybe, because I feel like I could have definitely worded that a bit better, and I might re-explain it in another video, but yeah. I did just remember one more point, so I'm going to quickly just talk about it. And this is kind of in the area of lukewarm Christianity, I would say, but it is really with anyone because I do struggle with this myself, and it's an ongoing fight, honestly. There are a lot of people nowadays, and especially in the church, right? I'm talking about the church in general with preachers and pastors, right? People are very quiet to talking about sin and talking about the truth of the Bible and exposing what God doesn't agree with. I struggle a lot to express my own beliefs, and I think that, a lot of people are very nice, but the Bible doesn't call us to be nice. We're told to be kind and we're told to be truthful. So, when people do want to express another opinion or talk about what they believe is right and wrong, it needs to be expressed kindly and in a loving way. But that doesn't mean withholding truth. It doesn't mean, also being really mean about it, because like I said, people get judged in the church for just being old or for being part of the rainbow community. And if you don't agree with it, or if you do believe it's a sin, then you do need to approach it in a kind way. You don't just help someone they're going to hell, because that's not gonna do any good. And then, with lukewarm Christianity, I think especially in progressive Christianity, people support certain causes and communities because they might genuinely think that it's fine, but then also there are people who are afraid to speak up, and they're very nice about things. They don't want to risk offending people, and you don't even have to take this in terms of controversial topics or biblical topics, but just in general, right? Sometimes you just don't want to speak up because everyone supports one person and you're just afraid to kind of sound like the bad guy, even if you feel off about them, right? So just some food for thought. I just think people are very quiet about speaking up, and this is an area that I'm struggling with too. I want to work on it, and I'm hoping that this might help encourage other people too. But yeah. So I'll leave it at that. I really appreciate it if you've made it to the end, and thank you for bearing with my really long yap session, because I know this is a very long video now, and it could have gone probably a little bit better, but I've done my best to express my thoughts and convey things to the best of my ability off the top of my head. So, I don't know, pretty happy with that, I guess. And yeah, so if you have any questions, please do let me know in the comments below. I would be happy to answer them. I'm happy to have a discussion with you if you have any questions, need clarity. And if you have any ideas for things you want me to explore, or I don't know, you also want to vote on one of my next discussions, I do have a link. I will have a link in the description of this video where you can kind of submit a form and you can kind of just vote on the topics you would like to see in the future, as well as, you know, just let me know any suggestions you have, because I would really appreciate it. And if you have certain questions or things you're just not really sure about and you're still trying to understand where to like go in the Bible, right? Or if you're new and you want to, you know, you're interested in Christianity, you just kind of want to understand more about it, and I guess, yeah, really anything like that, I would really encourage you and would appreciate it if you did submit a form. Yeah, so again, I'll leave it at this. I kept digressing a lot, going off topic, but yeah, so thank you for watching, and I will see you another time. God bless. Bye.
Just leave me for somebody else.